It began, weirdly enough, with the clang of a bell, a battered, off-key clang I will never forget. It was still dark, patches of new rain glistening under the sodium lamps. The Flores factory smelled of metal, coffee, and, at that hour, tiredness. When the foreman called us to line up by the rollers, everyone grumbled, pulling jackets tighter. I was thinking of colors and data sets when he read my name. "Zaret, outside," he said. Shouts from above rattled overhead pipes. I felt 30 eyes jolt in my direction. Miguel Zaret, always late, the weirdo doodling on scraps, the computer boy, as they sometimes joked. Dawn crept over the strips of plastic windows, the sky soaked pale blue. I walked out past rusted drums and the axle press into the parking lot behind the loading dock. Jose, the night manager, waited at the door, jaw set, black hair oiled back. "You're not needed anymore," he said. "2 minutes," I said, the words coming brittle through lips that trembled. "Let me explain about the charts. What I've been working on could help us, maybe save time with the shipments." He raised a hand, palm outward, like casting a blunt spell. "Enough, Zaret, you walk around showing bosses graphs and drawings on your phone. You think you're smarter than everyone. This isn't an office in Palermo. We don't need your computer art. We need arms." Arrivederci. I remember how the city looked from the curb, towers of concrete, garbage men wheeling bins. I'd planned to spend those pesos on a new tablet, buy time for my ambitions. Now 2 cracked shoes, a coat too thin for the cold, and no job. I almost called home for comfort, but then I remembered my sister's laughter at Sunday dinners, or Papa shaking his head, "Miguelito, please, que ridicules. What's data art going to feed you?" Instead, I wandered, letting the city swallow me up. Around Plaza Miserere, the day bloomed orange and pink, and I let the streets drag me. I think part of me hoped for a sign. A message on my phone, someone missing me, saying they needed those graphs after all. Nobody called. I reached home hours later, my room at the edge of Mataderos. Mama's voice came from the kitchen, bright and busy. "Miguelito. Did you get eggs?" Her face dropped when she saw me. "Oh, you look pale, que te pasa?" I shrugged. "La Fabrica, out, finished." She pressed her lips together, concern flickering in her dark eyes, but handed me bread, as if I could eat away the worry. At dinner, Papa raised the question I feared most. "So, another week, another job gone." He said it softly, but I felt the scorn. "I told them about my project," I said. "A way to track lost shipments with color patterns, not just numbers." They didn't care. Giolai, my sister, almost snorted into her soup. "Why do you always think they'll listen? It's a factory, not Silicon Valley." Papa's spoon clinked. "We come from work," he said, low but sharp, "and we work with hands, not with," he motioned to the phone at my elbow, "gadgets." I looked at the floor, ashamed and angry all at once, my hunger unspooled by the growing sense I'd never be enough for them. The next weeks were a haze. I applied everywhere, washed dishes, delivered bread, even tried a temp gig stuffing bills into envelopes at a place in San Telmo. Most evenings I locked myself in my room, sifting through downloaded data sets, making mosaics from lines and nodes and colors nobody else wanted to see. I posted online under an invented name, Miguel Milo, but nobody noticed at first. One afternoon, leaving the grocery store, I ran into Juan, my cousin, leaning against his scooter, helmet in hand. From his mouth, the family's doubts always came sugar-coated, but cutting just the same. "Hey, artist," he shouted, not unkind, but loud enough for the old man at the register to smirk. "Still with your datos, eh?" He shrugged. "Try Uber. It's rapido te pagan el mismo dia." He meant to help, still the words landed like hailstones. What if they're right, I wondered. What if my ideas are a joke? At night, lying awake listening to the city's brittle chorus, the dogs, the distant ambulances, I thought of quitting. Maybe save enough for school, train as a mechanic, make my parents proud. But in the half-light I saw flashes, color fields twisting into Buenos Aires bus routes, dots lighting up the poverty belts, pulling patterns from what looked like chaos, stories nobody else noticed. Something in me twisted with longing then, not just for recognition, but for the voice to prove I could make meaning out of numbers. Sometimes I worked until dawn, building quick sketches on borrowed computers in internet cafes. I watched endless YouTube tutorials, learned about data scraping, how to code, how to tell stories with nothing but color, shape, truth. Money was tight. I borrowed old phones from friends or family, picked up side gigs, but always I returned to the art. Months blurred, cold nights, hungry mornings, but one winter Thursday I received an email, the subject line, "NYC Open Data Art Prize, congratulations." At first I thought it was a scam, then I read the sender again. City Viz Arts Council, my map shimmering rows of bus routes across Buenos Aires arranged as layered bursts of color had won a Rising Voices prize. They wanted to display my work, pay me, and publish an article about who I was and what I saw. A train ticket sat in my inbox, the first time anyone had cared enough to send me anywhere at all. I bought new shoes, sent screenshots to Giolai, who replied with a single emoji. The thinking face, as if trying to decide between pride and disbelief. I told Mama, who crossed herself grateful but cautious. Papa only said, "Americans, that's far, Hijo." A month later, I stepped off a subway platform into Manhattan's forest of glass. My art was hung inside a white-walled gallery. Strangers looked at it, pointed, asked me questions, not about what is this for, but how did you see this? I had no good answer except the truth. For me, numbers had always wanted to become art, to asterisk show something hidden but essential. A man in a blazer, a curator, asked, "Do you have more?" Another woman took my hand, "Come meet the director." "Do you have a gift, Miguel's?" Contracts followed, work, interviews even, enough to drain away for a time the self-doubt that had knifed me as a kid on the factory floor. Those colors saved me. Each new piece I made, networks of poverty, lines of stories, violent outbursts mapped in red, slow redevelopment in patient green, found an audience. The world, I realized, was hungrier for truth than anyone back home had guessed. Still, I missed Buenos Aires. I craved Corapan and the chaos of Avenida Rivadavia. Most of all, I missed the faces of my parents, not the worn tape of my old life, but the reality of standing in front of them, different at last. 2 years passed before I could return. My Spanish grew clumsy. My hair had grown. I stepped off the plane with a suitcase of prints, contracts, and an invitation I couldn't explain. Argentina wanted El Art de los Datos, my first solo show, displayed at the city's new museum in Puerto Madero. An afternoon sun flooded the arrivals hall. Papa stood with a sign, my childhood nickname, Milo, and a look I couldn't read. Giolai hugged me, then checked my jacket pocket for any evidence this was real. On the way home, Papa drove in silence, eyes fixed on the road. Every so often he glanced in the mirror. I saw questions brimming on the edge of his tongue, but he swallowed them, letting the engine's hum fill the space between us. We had coffee at the kitchen table that first morning. Mama fussed over my stubbled beard, Giolai snapped photos. Papa smoked, his blue work shirt buttoned right to the throat. "At the museum you'll see," I told them. "I want you there, I need all of you." Mama gripped my hand hard. Giolai scrolled her phone. Papa gave a little grunt, neither yes nor no. The week of the exhibit galloped by, a blur of calls, hurried meetings, interviews with newspapers. TV crews wanted to see me in my old neighborhood. A reporter filmed outside the building where I'd scribbled charts as a kid, asking, "Do you always see numbers in colors?" I almost laughed. Back then, I'd been mocked for exactly that. Opening night arrived. A brick sun slipping west painted the city. I wore a charcoal suit, black boots. Mama looked regal in blue. Papa wore a tie he probably last touched at his mother's funeral. Giolai, hair straightened, lipstick brave, whispered, "If you make me cry, I will kill you." In the main gallery, screens glowed with 3 of my pieces, one of them the original factory chart, only now towering 10 feet high. It showed the flows of goods through Flores, but overlaid in a riot of blues and reds, the stations whirling and colliding, patterns clear as music. Next to it was the map of Buenos Aires transit poverty. Neighborhoods like ours lit orange, lines spiraling into wealth and back out again. Finally, there was the piece from New York, a globe of networked lights tracing migration, loneliness, hope. People crowded the rooms. Old teachers, young students from Villa 20, neighbors from the barrio. But among them I saw, stiff in his jacket, Juan, my cousin. I saw Tia Marta, her lips pursed as if catching herself before dismissing this all as a mere hobby. Even Jose, the old factory foreman, shuffled in with his wife, the memory of my humiliation gleaming in his eyes. I invited my family to stand with me as I spoke. I described simply how patterns and stories lived inside the starkest numbers, how the city's invisible flows could be art if someone listened. Then the gallery lights dimmed. My first piece, Flores' network of lost shipments and time delays, swelled across every wall, every surface. The screens and projections turned the room into a moving landscape, lines of light pulsing around us all. Delivery routes became rivers, minutes turned to clusters of color, the crowd fell quiet, bathed in shifting blue, the silence louder than applause. I heard someone exhale. Mama gripped Papa's hand. He gazed at the chart for a long time, then stared at me, the confusion and disbelief melting into wonder. Somewhere behind me, Juan muttered low, not mocking this time, but amazed, "It's them, the shifts, the camioneros, all the lost stuff, but it's beautiful." I stepped forward, swallowing the lump in my throat. At the back, the old foreman stared slack-jawed, then, unexpected, started clapping. One by one, others joined, the applause rolling from the walls like thunder. Afterwards, as people moved, I found Papa standing alone. He waited as the others drifted off. "Your abuela couldn't read. Your mother made art from old fabrics when we still had nothing." He paused, eyes shining with pride and a new, fragile humility. "You see things the rest of us could not, Miguel. Perdoname, I did not understand." Mama came, arms wide, sobbing into my chest. Giulai winked, fighting tears. Even Juan, old sly smile gone, offered a handshake and a sheepish, "You did good, primo." People queued that night to ask about my work. Their questions weren't about the old factory or about how strange it was to dream, but about what else the world could become now that someone had brought numbers and stories together. I could have flown away again, chased new contracts or glories abroad, but what I'd longed for was right here, the proof not just of having made it, but of having returned, seen, finally understood, not only by strangers, but by the ones who doubted most. Later, walking home through the drizzle, Papa put his hand on my shoulder. His voice was rough with emotion. "Next week you will come to dinner. Giulai will brag, your mother will cook. We will explain to all of Ramos Mejia what you have done. Let them try calling it ridiculous now." I smiled, breath misting in the city cold, and looked back at the glowing museum windows, the colors spilling onto the street. It was Buenos Aires, just ordinary, but also finally the city of my dreams.